I'm Michael Groden, and I'm talking from my apartment in Toronto. Like Leopold Bloom's day in Dublin, in Ulysses, my life in the age of COVID-19 began at home with Molly. In my case, with my wife, Molly Peacock. On March 1st, we left, as we do every year, to spend a month in New York City to teach 4 Sunday afternoon classes at the 92nd Street Y, mine in Ulysses and hers on poetry. We taught our first one on March 8th, but as that week went on, and almost everything we went to New York to do was canceled, and the city started to seem increasingly dangerous, we made a sudden decision to come back home, and we've been here now for over a month. Back home, we didn't have any secrets to keep from each other from our time away, and we make our own breakfasts. But our voyages around the world, and even around our city, are completely stifled. We spend our lot of time watching the news, listening to it, and thinking about both the present and our pasts, including those 12 days in New York that now seem so long ago. Toronto isn't nearly as bad as a lot of other cities, but we have many COVID-19 cases and many deaths. I go out running in the mornings when I can. We exercise in our apartment each afternoon, and each evening, instead of going out for a walk as we'd like to do, we walk 20 times around our lovely and comfortable but small apartment. My one extended excursion is walking to Toronto's Princess Margaret Cancer Centre once every 3 weeks for my immunotherapy appointments. These go on as always, and it's a strange but perverse feeling almost of normalcy that they go on as they always have. Ulysses remains very much a part of my life and a valued part, here in my office filled with books on Joyce and Ulysses. I retired from teaching several years ago, but I teach Ulysses to adults whenever I can do that. My 92nd Street Y class was curtailed, of course, but after teaching the first class in person, I was able to do the other 3 via Zoom. Like a lot of other people, I knew nothing whatever about Zoom a month ago, and now I'm fairly proficient at it. I try to do work on Joyce whenever I can. The publisher of my new book, called The Necessary Fiction, Life with James Joyce and Ulysses, told me while I was still in New York that he was planning to bring out a paperback edition in the fall. So I got to read the book again to try to find typos to correct when it comes out. I've been enjoying reading other books on Ulysses, most recently Claire Hutton's book on Ulysses in the Little Review called Serial Encounters. I'm delighted to read about Joyce and Joyceans whenever anything catches my attention. For example, this weekend in the New York Times Book Review, a review of a book about crossword puzzles, of all things, mentioned Ruth von Pfuhl, a Joyce scholar from the 1950s and 60s and 70s that people my age might remember, who apparently was a crossword puzzle expert in the 20s and 30s. And I'm trying to do work on my own. I need to do work on Joyce's letters for the Unpublished Joyce Letters Project, and to write an essay for a book of articles that's coming out next year. I'm always a good procrastinator. I've always been very good at that, but I'm especially good at it now. And even though my files in my file cabinet and my computer files on my machine and my music files are much better organized than they were a month ago, I found it not very easy to begin working on these projects, although I know that I should be. About 10 years ago, I gave a talk on the subject of us in Ulysses. I found that almost every time characters are part of a group, or that they talk about a group that they're in, or even when they refer to a group of people as we or us, it's an extremely unpleasant, unattractive group. And that Leopold Bloom and Stephen Dedalus and even Molly Bloom, in the isolation that Joyce shows them in all the way through Ulysses, end up almost being better off by not being a part of that group. And yet, Ulysses is a book that brings individual readers and scholars, all of us working alone in isolation, together. And it's been doing that ever since the book came out. And I've been intrigued all along by the anomaly of a novel about isolated people that tends to bring so many people together. And now, in these extreme conditions that we find us in, as Sean Latham and Kevin Detmar and Sam Sloat have each talked about in their little essays, we feel connected in ways that we never could before, at times when we are not able to get together in any way in person. And so, to next year in Trieste, when we can all get together again, and to 2022 in Dublin. And thanks to Sean Latham and Carol Kelleher from the James Joyce Quarterly for setting up this project. And when so much around us now could cause us to say no, and just as so much in Leopold Bloom's and Molly Bloom's life could cause them to say no in Ulysses, I take heart that Ulysses doesn't end that way, that it ends with yes. And I want to conclude my little talk with Molly Bloom's last words in Ulysses, here spoken by the Molly that I'm sheltered at home with, Molly Peacock.
And yes, I said, yes, I will, yes.